Hey everybody, welcome to Algo Expert. In this video, we're going to answer the following behavioral interview question. How would you go about distributing work for a project across a team of software engineers? If you've led a project in the past, describe what you did. So, I think that the first thing I would do, which is the first thing that you probably should do if you're trying to distribute work across a team of engineers, is to scope out the work. It's very important for you to understand what it is exactly that you're building and to have a clear picture of the various sort of logical chunks that the project or the work can be divided into that engineers on your team can then take ownership of. So you want to divide the work into these sensible chunks, and here it's kind of half art, half science, because you don't want to be too vague. Like, you don't want to just say, oh, the chunk of work is that we have to build an API. That's kind of like too vague. But on the other hand, you probably don't want to go too deep or too granular. For instance, if we're talking about front-end engineering and you're building, a brand new product or feature that's got 5 different pages, and one of those pages is a form, you probably don't want to divide it into each individual input field. That might be something for the engineer who's going to be taking charge of that page. That might be for them to do in their own design doc of that page or what have you. So, point is, you want to scope out the work without being too deep or too far removed. And here, my guideline typically would be, if we're talking about backend, maybe scope out the work with the various API endpoints that you're going to be building, or the various logical pieces of functionality of a feature that you're going to be supporting. For the front end, maybe the different pages that you're going to be building out. Once you've done that, you have to be able to balance a few things at the same time. So, first of all, you have to make sure that the work gets done, right? And so, work that is highly critical and that is very difficult has to be prioritized, and oftentimes it has to be assigned to the most capable person. If you've got maybe a senior engineer on the team who would be most qualified to complete this very complicated part of the project, and who would be the least risky person to assign this part of the project to, then that might just have to happen. Now, this actually can go against one of the other things that you need to balance, which is people's happiness, right? If you're on a team, you want to make sure that your engineers are happy. And sometimes, some people have preferences. Maybe another engineer is going to say, hey, I would have really liked to work on this part of the feature, but you have to use your judgment to see if that would make sense. Sometimes those priorities, like the critical work, and assigning it to someone who's able to complete it is going to take precedence over someone's preference of what they want to work on. And then the last thing that you want to balance is your engineers' career trajectories, and this might be, I guess, more relevant for managers, but even as a peer, if you're, let's say, the team lead of a project or the project lead of a project, you want to look out for your peers and you want to make sure that they're best equipped for their career, to grow in their career, and same for yourself, to be honest. And so if you've got one engineer on your team who really needs to focus on proving their technical, their ability to build out technically complex features, then ideally you can assign to them technically complex features. If you've got someone who needs to work a little bit more with other teams and other stakeholders, then maybe it might make sense to put them on a part of the project that is going to involve, meetings with backend engineers or with product managers or UX designers. Point is, you have to balance all of these things, right? The criticality, if that's a word, of parts of the project to ensure that stuff gets done, people's personal preferences, just to make sure that people are happy, and also people's career trajectories and making sure that you're setting them up for success. Now, one thing that is sometimes overlooked that's also important to keep in mind is just logistical issues. So sometimes, you'll have some people who have to travel at one point during the quarter, or some people who, for whatever reason, have a commitment that they can't get out of, and that's going to prevent them from attending certain meetings, or they won't be able to attend meetings with other engineers who are in a different time zone at a specific time. When you've got these logistical issues, you have to also keep them in mind in the way that you distribute the work. If someone is not going to be able to attend meetings with engineers who are in a completely different time zone late in the day, then maybe somebody else should do the work that is going to require attending those meetings. And so everything that I'm describing here stems from a lot of different experiences, but I'm specifically thinking about one, which was the last project that I worked on when I was a software engineer at Google. I was leading the project. I was kind of the tech lead of the project, and this was a very large project. We had engineers in a different time zone in South Korea, so 14 hours ahead. Lots of work, new engineers, existing engineers, people of different levels, and so I basically applied everything that I'm describing here. I scoped out the work, not too granular, but not too high level, assigned it in a way that made most sense. So parts of the project that didn't require too much context in the code base were given to some of these new engineers that were just joining the team. Parts of the project that were very critical and that needed a lot of context were given to existing engineers who had already been on the team, even if they were not necessarily going to benefit from having those technically complex projects under their belt. Maybe they would have been better given to a more junior engineer who would have really been able to make use of that, had to make some trade-offs there. And and then finally the time zone thing. I made sure to assign work in a way that made sense and respected people's preferences with when they like to work, whether or not they're going to be able to go to meetings with engineers in a different time zone, and so on and so forth.